Hi, I'm Selena with the IMAS, and for today's Workshop Wednesday, we're learning how to make a DIY loom. For this, we're going to be using some simple materials you can find around your home, and we're going to learn a few weaving techniques to help you finish off your masterpiece. For this project, I'm going to be using some scrap cardboard, a ruler, a pencil, scissors, and yarn. I almost forgot the tape. Don't forget the tape. I'll also be using a plastic needle, which isn't necessary, but it does make the job easier. In case you've never heard about a loom is a tool used to make textiles like fabric by weaving yarn or thread. First things first, let's make our loom. Take your sheet of cardboard and cut it down to a size you feel is best for you. I'm going to be working on a 5 by 5 inch square. Next, take your ruler along one of the edges. Measure and mark some lines at least 1 centimeter apart. We're also going to make sure they're at least 1/2 inch long. Be sure to do the same to the opposite side, making sure that they both have the same number of lines. Now take your scissors and cut at the lines to create cuts in the cardboard. And now you have a DIY loom ready for weaving that you can use multiple times. The next step is to thread the loom. Take some thread and tie one end onto the corner of your loom. Leave your thread as long as possible to ensure you have enough to get your loom started. Here I'm making sure it at least meets the middle of the back, and now I'm going to bring that string all the way down and slide it through the bottom cut on the opposite side. And now on the back, you're going to bring that thread up to the next cut and pass it through to the front once again. Now bring it down to the opposite cut and repeat these steps until you finish prepping your loom. These threads going up and down, held in place by the loom, are called warp threads. Finish off by sliding the thread through the last cut in the cardboard. The thread on the back of the loom will be going at a diagonal. Now I'm going to cut off that last bit of thread and tape it down. It's important to make sure that the ends of the thread meet the middle of the cardboard. And now we're ready to start weaving. Here I'm measuring the length of one row and then multiplying that by 10 so that I can make 10 rows. There really is no wrong or right length to start weaving, but you want to make sure it's at least long enough to go from left to right, but not too long to where you're struggling. Starting on either the left or right side is fine. To begin, I'm going to bring up that first orange thread, also called my warp thread, and bring my green thread under. Now I'm going to go over the next orange thread and then under again. So we're going under one and over one until we reach the other side. The green thread going left and right is called our weft. To make the weaving process a little bit easier, especially if you're doing it with your hands, is to take a pencil and lay it under your warp threads. This will bring the warp threads up a little bit higher so that it's much easier to go under and over. Again, we are going under one and over one until we get to the other side. Now you can go ahead and pull that weft thread all the way through until you have just a few inches left sticking out. Every time you weave a row, you're going to use your fingers to pull it down to the very bottom so that they can nicely stack. For the rest of this video, I'm going to be using a plastic needle. I'm going to take the end of my thread and double knot it so that I can easily weave it through. Take a look at how you finished your first row. If it's going over, you're going to start your next one by going under. If you finished your first row by going under, then you're going to start your second one by going over. Continue weaving until you get to the other end. Pull the thread all the way through. As you continue, you want to make sure that when pulling the thread to the next row, not to pull too tightly. You'll want to leave about a few centimeters of thread sticking out at the end. Again, use your fingers to slide that row of thread down so that it stacks nicely on top of the last one. If you pull too tightly, you're going to actually warp your warp threads. If this happens, no problem, just use your pencil or your needle to loosen it up. Again, we're going to weave opposite of the last row we just did. Continue following these steps until you run out of thread. This is what your weaving should start looking like. When I'm close to running out of thread, I like to see if I can at least make another row. If not, I just make it easier for myself and cut that off. I liked the length of thread I was working with, so again, I'm measuring about 10 rows of thread and starting with that again. I'm going to, again, go over and under one until I get to the other side with a few inches of thread left. Bring that thread down so that it stacks on top of the last row and continue weaving. By the way, this one over and one under style is called a plain weave. This is one of the most basic forms of weaving, but there's a lot of styles out there that you might like to try. Here's what I have so far. To switch it up, I'm going to go with orange for the next turn, so that way I can make an orange stripe running through. I'm going to continue by following the same steps I did before. Nothing has changed except for the color. And now I'm going back to green to finish it off. If you're using a needle, you're going to have the benefit of nicely cleaning off these edges. I'm going to take the end of my needle and run it through what looks like a tunnel at the end of my textile. It doesn't have to go very far, I just want to make sure that the thread that's sticking out is able to run through and be hidden. As I'm pulling through, I want to be gentle by holding the thread at the top so that it doesn't scrunch. And now I'm just going to hide that end. If it's sticking out too much, you can just take some scissors and trim it. I'm going to be doing this to all the pieces that are sticking out on my sides. If you don't have a needle, take those threads that are sticking out and tie them in a double knot. On the first one, you want to do it lightly, and the second, tightly. In the video, I didn't make it too tight because I wanted to continue running them through the tunnels of my textile. When you're ready to remove the textile from the loom, flip it over, remove the pieces of tape, take your scissors, and cut those strings along the very center. Gently remove the warp threads from the loom by pulling them to the front. This is what it should look like at the front, and you can now remove the loom. Now we just need to finish off the top and bottom edges. To make certain that the weaving I just did for my textile doesn't unravel, I'm going to take those loose ends by 2 and double knot them together. I'm going to continue doing this with all the other loose threads. If at one end you happen to have 3 loose threads remaining, you can take 2 to one side and 1 to the other and still double knot that together. And this is what your edges should look like. Now, if you want to trim these remaining strings down, feel free to do that, but I'm gonna show yet another way to take it further by tucking in those loose strings. Again, I'm taking my needle and running it down the tunnel of my textile. I'm going to take the thread that's sitting closest to that tunnel and run it through. Here, I'm holding onto the knot just to make sure that I don't pull too hard. And now you can see that I have a pretty clean end. It is an extra step, so you can always leave those hanging strings for nice detail. And that's it for this video. Thanks so much for joining me this week on another Workshop Wednesday. We can't wait to see what awesome work you come up with. As always, share your work with us using hashtag IMASartists on Instagram and Facebook. To learn more and to support us, visit theimasonline.org.